Good afternoon to everybody. And really, I am thankful to Sunita and her team for allowing me to speak on pelvic floor surgical anatomy and its application. See, abdominal hysterectomy is a surgery. Laparoscopic hysterectomy involves keyhole surgery. Vaginal hysterectomy is an art. This is the gold standard operation, and really it is a signature operation of the gynecologic profession and is measure of a surgical excellence. Next to cesarean section, hysterectomy is the most common surgery for gynecological disorders. Now, why not vaginal? So, because vaginal route is the natural route, it is minimal invasive route, and there is no scar and least loss of working days. I can quote a Cochrane review, August 2015, that vaginal route should be considered primary unless there are specific contraindications. Even if it is so, still abdominal hysterectomy is preferred by many gynecologists, and ratio of abdominal to vaginal is 70 to 30. I wonder, when the fetus can come out from the vagina, why not uterus? This could be because of fear of injury to surrounding tissue and organs, because it is a blind procedure, or the experience of the surgeon for vaginal route or hysterectomy could be less. It is very essential that when you select the route, abdominal, laparoscopic, or vaginal, it is very essential to do a pre-operative assessment. Many times it is a surgeon's choice, but we have to decide whether it is feasible to do vaginal hysterectomy, because perfect selection of the case is the key of success. A comprehensive knowledge of the pelvic floor is mandatory for vaginal hysterectomy because to safely attain access, maximize exposure, ensure hemostasis, and avoid injury to the ureter, bladder, blood vessel, and bowel. Pelvic floor, it is a dome-shaped muscular sheet. It provides a primary dynamic support to the pelvic viscera along with connective tissue, that is endopelvic fascia and the ligament. It maintains the continence of the urine and fecal matter, allows voiding of urine, defecation, sexual activity, and childbirth. Pelvic floor consists of pelvic diaphragm, perineal membrane, deep perineal pouch, and the body. Now, the pelvic diaphragm, it consists of a sheet of muscle of levator ani, the pubococcygeus, iliococcygeus, and coccygeus muscle. There are two hiatus, urogenital and hiatus rectalis. All these muscles, they arise from the arcus tendinus, which is nothing but the thickening of the fascia on the obturator internus. It starts from the pubic symphysis to the ischial spine. The levator ani, there are pubococcygeus, and pubococcygeus we divide again into pubovaginalis, which arises from the medial most part of the arcus tendinus on the pubic symphysis. It goes back, fibers get merged into the vagina and form a sling, so around the vagina. So this is called as a pubovaginalis. Lateral to that, the fibers go posterior and get merged partly into the lateral walls of the rectum and then form the sling for the rectum. This is called as a puborectalis. And lateral part of the belly is a pubococcygeus, which go to the coccyx, get inserted, but in between it fuses with opposite belly and form the median tendinous raphe. Lateral to that is the iliococcygeus, which is a thin sheet of muscle arising from the arcuate line just below the below the line, pubopectineal line, and then it goes posteriorly along with the pubococcygeus. It also forms the median tendinous raphe and then get inserted into coccyx. Last muscle is this is coccygeus muscle arising from the ischial spine and going back and getting inserted into coccyx and the side walls of the last piece of sacrum. Now, the levator ani muscle consists of two types of fibers: slow twitch fibers, which maintain constant tone, and the fast twitch fibers, which are concentrated at the periurethral site as well as the anorectal junction. They contract vigorously as soon as the intra-abdominal pressure is raised to counteract it and to prevent incontinence. Now, this is the sling formed by the puborectalis and the pubovaginalis. What is the function of this sling? When the intra-abdominal pressure is raised, puborectalis will pull the anorectal junction anteriorly, and pubovaginalis pull the middle part of the vagina anteriorly. So what is the achievement? The rectum will go, anal canal will go posterior, and the vagina, because it is pulled anteriorly, the upper part is like lying on the transverse and the lower part in the vertical diameter. So it will close the anorectal junction. Not only that, it compresses the vagina also, so nothing can come out even though the intra-abdominal pressure is raised. After crossing the levator ani, the distal part of the urethra, distal part of the vagina, pierce the perineal membrane. This perineal membrane is of two layers, the superior and the inferior. Then in between the superior and inferior membrane, there is a deep perineal pouch, and then it pierces the deep perineal pouch and open externally at the introitus. Behind the perineal membrane, there is a perineal body and the anal canal. So if you see at the perineum, there are two triangles. Anterior triangle, urogenital triangle, and posterior triangle is an anal triangle. Anterior triangle is covered by a musculofacial layer. This is called as the perineal membrane, and this is attached above to the pubic symphysis, laterally to the descending rama of the pubis, and then posteriorly it is attached to the perineal body. But if you see the anal compartment or anal triangle, it is not, or it is without any fascia. It is surrounded only by the muscles. If you cut the labia majora, underneath the labia majora, you will see bulbospongiosus, perineal membrane, the superficial transverse perineal muscle, and the sphincter ani externi. All these muscles, they get mixed at the center, and they form the perineal base of the perineal body. If you cut the bulbospongiosus, then you will see that laterally you will see the vestibular bulb, and below that there is a Bartholin's gland. If you open the inferior part of the membrane, then underneath that you will see a deep transverse perineal muscle, and not only that, the striated muscle, that is sphincter urethri, compressor urethri, and ureterovaginal sphincter. These play a very important role, because when the intra-abdominal pressure is raised, all these muscles, they will close the urethral opening, and there is a narrowing of the vaginal outlet. So there is no incontinence or there is no prolapse. So the perineal body is a pyramidal shaped, this is the perineal body, which is a pyramidal shaped body. The apex is situated at anorectal junction. The base is formed by the bulbospongiosus, superficial transverse perineal, and external anal sphincter. The middle piece is formed by the deep transverse perineal muscle and the striated muscles, and apex is formed by decussating fibers of puborectalis. I'm showing you this slide to show that a puborectalis, after forming a sling, few fibers, they go along with the longitudinal muscle of the rectum and the anal canal and form the external anal sphincter, deep, superficial, and subcutaneous. So the puborectalis not only governs the activity of the rectum, but it controls the anus also. Now, if you see the endopelvic fascia, there is a parietal fascia, which is dense connective tissue covering levator ani superiorly and inferior aspect of the levator ani, and there is a visceral fascia. The visceral fascia surrounds the uterus, bladder, vagina, and the rectum. But the posterior fascia is more well developed, which is formed by the it is formed by the rectal fascia and the fascia around the posterior wall of the vagina. De Novillers fascia is also second name to that, or we call it as a rectovaginal space, fascia or a septum. And the beauty of it is that in the upper part it is attached to the arcus tendinous or white line, and the lower part it is attached to the perineal body. So what are the ligaments? Ligaments are nothing but the thickening of endopelvic fascia in which large quantity of smooth muscles is incorporated. So we are aware about the fascia around the cervix. So the pubocervical ligament, transverse or the cardinal ligament, uterosacral ligament. I want you to focus your attention on the avascular spaces between the bladder, the vagina and the supravaginal part of the cervix, and between the vagina and the rectum. These are avascular spaces called as a vesico-uterine space or the vesico-rectal space. And of course, there are other spaces, para-vesical and para-rectal, and the retrorectal space also. Now, why it is important to know these spaces which are avascular? Because when we do vaginal surgery, we are supposed to remain in this avascular space. Because if you see this slide, the blood vessels, they pierce this thickened fascia and supply the viscera. So if you are little bit posterior from this space, you will not able to dissect the bladder properly and there will be oozing. Same is with when you are separating the rectum from the vagina, you should be in this avascular space to avoid injury to the rectum and to avoid injury to the blood vessels. Otherwise there is oozing and the plane of cleavage is lost. All of us are aware about the ureteric tunnel and crossing of the ureter and uterine artery, which is 1.5 centimeter lateral to the side wall of the supravaginal part of the cervix. I want you to see this circular artery, which is a branch of the uterine artery. This branch is given at the site of crossing of the ureter and uterine. And these two branches, they go anteriorly, surround the cervix, and then they meet with the azygous vessel, anterior azygous and the posterior azygous arteries. So if you are not in a avascular plane for separating the bladder or rectum, you are likely to injure this circular artery, and there will be a lot of oozing from the circular artery. And when we are doing colpoperineography, posteriorly we are separating the rectum from the vagina, so the azygous vessels may get injured. Let us see the relation of the ureters with the ligament. When the ureter crosses the ischial spines, they go anteriorly and medially towards the McEnroe's ligament. But if you see the cores, they are very close to the uterosacral ligament near the cervix, where the uterosacrals get inserted. And the distance is 0.9 centimeter from this area. But if you go little bit posteriorly, the distance is increased. It is 2.3 plus minus 0.9 centimeter. And at the sacral region, where the uterosacral get inserted into second, third, and fourth sacral foramina, they are far away. So when we are doing hysterectomy at the time of clamping of the uterosacral, better not to be very close to the cervix. Go little bit posteriorly and clamp the uterosacral ligament so that you will avoid injury to the ureter. We have already discussed about the crossing of the ureter and uterine artery in the, at the tunnel. So here we have to clamp the McEnroe close to the cervix. When the ureters leave the tunnel and go anteriorly to enter into the bladder, they are lying 1.2 centimeter above the fornices. Now, this is the relation between the bladder, supravaginal part of the cervix and the vagina. So, if you are going to have your tonsils removed, would you prefer they to be taken out through your throat or through an incision in the side of your neck? Think over. These are the different steps of vaginal hysterectomy. All of us are aware about this, so I need not tell to this August gathering. But it is essential to know the sulci on the anterior wall of the vagina, as if we go from below upwards, then the first thing you will see submeatal sulcus. This sulcus, and the second is the transverse sulcus, which denotes the junction of the urethra and the bladder. And last one, I'm going from below up, and last is the vesical sulcus, which show the upper limit of the bladder. So it is easy to know this when we are operating. So you can give traction over the cervix, retract anterior wall, vaginal wall, and push the cervix little bit. You will able to see the vesical sulcus because our incision depends on that. Then because we like hydrodissection, we will inject saline anteriorly, laterally, and posteriorly to have a good plane of cleavage before giving incision. Then we give incision. Where to give incision? It should be just below the vesical sulcus. And the vesical, how you will know? Second point is the rugosity of the vagina starts from there. So if your incision is on the vagina, which is adherent to the cervix, you will be disrupting the cervical fibers. If you go above this, you are likely to injure the bladder. So your incision in the vagina should be on just below the vesical sulcus. So after opening the vagina, we put our finger inside, remain in the center in a vesico-cervical space, which is avascular, and try to separate the bladder. So go up till you feel the UV fold. Many people just extend the incision and open the UV fold first, or few surgeons, they open it after clamping the uterine artery. So after separation of the bladder, retract the bladder in an upward direction so that the pillars, bladder pillars will stand out. Here by blunt dissection or a little bit sharp dissection, you can separate the pillars from the supravaginal part of the cervix on the lateral side. Thus you can avoid ureteric injury. Now, opening the pouch of Douglas. Again, you will have to see the rugosity, and just below the rugosity, you will have to open. So catch the vagina, you can open the pouch along with the vagina or incise vagina, separate the vagina, but don't go far posteriorly, because if you see the fat, remember fat belongs to the rectum. So you must identify that, identify the pouch and cut. If you are unable to, then palpate the uterosacral ligament. The pouch is between the ligaments because the uterosacrals, they form lateral border of the pouch. After opening the pouch, then retract the uterus a little bit so that you will able to see the uterosacral ligament. And I have already told you that your clamp should not be very close to the uterosacral. It should go a little bit posterior to avoid injury. So after clamping, cutting and ligating the uterosacrals, then you will see the McEnroe's ligament. The McEnroe ligament, here you will have to apply clamp close to the cervix. And now to avoid injury, you can retract the bladder in upward direction and pull the cervix in a downward direction. This will increase the distance between the clamp and ureter, so you will able to avoid the ureteric injury. After clamping, cutting and ligating McEnroes, because the McEnroe forms the base of the broad ligament. So with a little bit dissection of the cellular tissue, you will nicely see the uterine going up towards the fundic region. So there you have to clamp the uterine vessels, and again it should be close to the cervix. After clamping uterine, then you have opened the pouch anterior as well as the posterior. You deliver the uterus, you will able to see the round ligament, you will able to see the fallopian tube and the ovarian ligament. You apply clamp on that close to the cornea and cut and ligate on both sides. Once you have ligated that, if suppose you want to remove the ovaries, you can apply in clamp on the infundibulopelvic ligament. Dr. Shirish Sheikh has designed this clamp very beautifully. Then once the uterus is out, you have to stitch the vault. And it is our aim that she should not develop vault prolapse later on. That is why the vault should be supported by ligating or stitching the uterosacral and cardinal ligament to the vault. If it is necessary, you can do a McCall's choldoplasty. So if there is a precise knowledge of the pelvic floor and proper training about vaginal surgery, of course, after perfect selection of the case, why to worry about vaginal hysterectomy? I will like to quote George Morley, who was a president of American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and he was also president of the Society of Pelvic Surgeons. What he has quoted: may the vaginal hysterectomy never be to gynecology what bridge delivery has become to obstetrics. I'm very much thankful to you for the patient hearing,